the solution, to identify the solution that best fits the situation, that best fits the requirement. So it will also show that the households cannot be, and this is also a point I wanted to emphasize, that the household cannot be taken in silo, but it will also be demonstrated through this, the different sessions, that they are intertwined with the operation, the delivery of electricity for productive use of energy, also for the community facilities. So a certain project, and I think the next one with Jackson GIZ, it's a good demonstration of the link and between the households and the rest of the activities, the humanitarian activities. Briefly, I will show you a quick presentation just to illustrates the different aspects that each of the presentation will try to cover and to present you. So there will be the same structure for each proposition. And let me share my screen now. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you, Sadiq. Okay. So each one of the presentation will start with by presenting the demand. So what we understand by demand is what are the needs in terms of protection, livelihood, and resilience. What are the issue or the problem or that we are trying to solve or to address with this electricity provision. And then we will also discuss the supply side of the environment. So, and the supplies cover the markets. So the prices, the grid, the different suppliers, and it will also discuss a little bit the policies, so the IDPs and energy policy, local policies. So with this, each presentation will show that there is, with those different requirements, we can already have a certain number of projects that we can, from a technical standpoint, identify. And all this will provide us the framework in which we will have to build a partnership in order to which each organization or partners will use certain financing tools or subsidies in order to come to the final project or solution decision. And this solution will finally provide the outcome will be increased improvements in the people of concern protection or the livelihoods of the displaced population or resilience of the host communities. So this was briefly the structure and the different aspects of each presentation that will follow. Now, I will let the floor to Jackson from GIZ, and thank you, Jackson, for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Then you can also see my screen. Eh?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, colleagues and partners, allow me some 20 minutes of your life to share our experiences on implementing mini grids in displacement settings here in Kenya, particularly in Turkana County, Turkana West Sub-County, in the famous Kakuma refugee camp, but on extension to Kalobeyei settlement. So I I'm working with GIZ, the Energy, Transport and Climate Change Cluster here in Kenya. And we are implementing a project called Energy Solutions for Displacement Settings, which is financed by the German government through the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. It's a joint project which we are implementing in cooperation with UNHCR, and it is part of a bigger global project called Support to UNHCR in the implementation of the Global Compact on Refugees. And so for the Kenyan component, we are implementing it with collaboration with the Ministry of Energy, the Turkana County government, which is the regional government hosting the refugees in Kakuma, Kalobeye, and also UNHCR offices, running from July 2019 and closing in October 2022. This project we are implementing, and 3 intervention areas, basically 2, but split into 3 sections. One is on policy coordination and capacity development, here where we are working with the regional government to develop their energy sector plan. And this energy sector plan is including refugee energy needs. Because the regional or the county government hosts the refugees, and the county government has their own development plans because of devolution. They have their own budget and they implement their own projects. Then we are also developing their capacities in the area of energy. Then again, we are looking at the greening of UNHCR and other humanitarian organizations' infrastructure. And here we will provide technical advisory on business delivery models, especially with the involvement of our private sector, because most of the humanitarian organizations use fossil fuel powered infrastructure. I mean, their assets are powered by fossil fuel. Then we will also be looking at energy access for the refugees and host communities. These are the households, the businesses, and the institutions. And here we are looking majorly at higher electricity access, which can also be used for productive use. So we are looking at Kalobeye settlement. Today we look at 2 areas where we have previously implemented operating projects already, and these are the ones which I'll share our experiences, which the ESDS project is building on. So we are looking at Kalobeye settlement, which is around 15 kilometers from the Kakuma refugee camp, and it was established in 2015 to decongest Kakuma refugee camp, because the Kakuma refugee camp, the land allocated by the government was already filled up. So it occupies around 15 square kilometers with 3 villages, and the idea of the Kalobeye settlement was to integrate refugees and host communities to live side by side. There's a population of around 40,000 refugees and around 7,900 households. Then the host community is not far away. It's around 8 kilometers from the settlement. It's a small town where the host community live, occupying around 2 kilometers square, with the people living in the town around 1,000 of them, with around 195 households. So the project which implemented, or which are partnered with the private sector to establish the 2 mini grids we'll share about today, was called the Resort-Based Financing Facility. It was financed by the UK Department for International Development, now FCDO, and through NDEF, and we implemented it through GIZ here in Kenya, and we partnered with a local financial institution, that is Barclays Bank of Kenya. So the idea was for market creation of private sector owned and operated off-grid mini grids, and it ran from July 2014 to June 2020. Basically, the implementation structure is the typical of RBF, meaning that upon competitive recruitment of the private sector to do the mini grid business, there was a RBF incentive contract between the fund manager and the private sector. So with this RBF contract, the private sector would finance fully the project, engineer it, do the procurement, do the construction. Then we have an external independent verifier who would verify that the results pre-agreed in the RBF contract were achieved before disbursement of the incentives. So when we were scoping for these mini grid sites in the off-grid counties, because the government allocated us 2 counties, that is Turkana County and Marsabit County, both of which are off-grid counties, we came into Kakuma refugee camp, and which is in Turkana County, and we were looking for sites there and doing the feasibility studies. That was part of the GIZ contribution to the development of these mini grids. And when we walked into the camp, we realized there was a need and there was a challenge at the same time. What you can see on the screen is what we found in Kakuma refugee camp and what is there even today. That there are lots of unregulated power generation systems. On the left, that is a diesel generator. I think it is of the 19th century technology. You look at it and it looks like it can run on water or it can run on anything. You throw an odd shoe on it and it can run. But these are the energy sources. That means when people are desperate for power, they will do anything to get that power. And when the opportunities are there, investors or local investors will do anything to provide solutions. And actually, this is working. It was working. It is working today. On the right, you can see the power distribution board. You can just go like 2 meters away from it and you are fearing already of electrocution. So it's dangerous, but it's providing service and people are getting these services. So here you will see the power distribution within Kakuma refugee camp, what I call spaghetti distribution. I mean, you never know where the power is coming from and where it is going. And on top, you can see a medium voltage line done by the Rural Electrification Authority, distributing power to the institutions in the camp, but not supplying households. So from the generator, we have seen it is supplying households through this spaghetti distribution under the medium voltage line. And this is dangerous. But at the same time, we said this looks like a market opportunity for private sector. So looking at it, we went also to Kalobei settlement at that time, around 2018, it was coming up with a well-planned settlement, but without power solution. And we said, maybe we can also encourage private sector to invest in such displacement settings. And that is how we now talked to the local or regional government and started doing feasibility studies for electrification of the host community town, as well as a pilot project in the refugee settlement, because the funds we had at that time could not electrify the whole of Kalobei settlement, the 3 villages. So here you will see the incentive structure of the RBF project, where we provided incentives based on 2 pre-agreed results, one on the full completion and commissioning of the power plant, upon which we would give a capex subsidy, like 30% of the total incentive, and then the pre-agreed number of connections, which would have been made and maintained for at least 3 months. This carried the heaviest or the largest incentive amount of 70%. The incentives were capped at 50% as agreed with DFID that time. But for Kalobei settlement and the host community, we negotiated for a higher incentive at 82% in order to match the national utility tariff rates with the principle of leave no one behind and do no harm as practiced in displacement settings. And that is why we were able now to reduce or rather to request private sector for proposals, which would mean that they charge the end users at the national tariff rates. So for the project implementation, of course, through this was the process with the key 8 steps mentioned here, from the feasibility studies done by GIZ and tendering with Barclays Bank of Kenya. Then the private sector needed to get approvals from the national and county governments. And then stakeholder engagement and land acquisition. Here, GIZ assisted with the local government and the community, and then permitting, because the regulator, the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, requires that all power generation, distribution, and retailing requires a permit, so it had to be obtained, as well as the environmental license. Then the private sector did financing and engineering, procurement and construction. Upon end of construction and connections, we did verification and authorized now disbursement of the incentives. Then operation and maintenance now was left to the private sector. Of course, such a process would mean a lot of stakeholders along the way, and you have to engage them at every stage. For every stakeholder is important for the implementation of the project. So of course, we have the sponsors at the high level, who are the drivers of energy transition, and the national regulatory authorities, as well as the regional one, to get the power supply permits and licenses. Of course, the implementing partners, that is private sector GIZ and the fund manager for coordination and the actual implementation of the project, and the humanitarian service providers, as it was in a displacement settings. And these are very important institutions who support the refugees to make sure that they are also able to afford the services of electricity, because it was a business model where the refugees, as well as the host communities, would pay for the electricity services. They were not provided for free. So here you will see a table with the summary of the two projects in the host community, as well as the refugee settlement. And you can see all the details here. In the host community, we sized a system of 20 kilowatt peak PV, and in the settlement 60 kilowatt peak PV. I mean, in the settlement, the 60 kilowatt was as a pilot project to connect part of village 1. As I said, there are 3 villages, but not the whole village. Of course, implemented in a modular style such that it can be upscaled upon testing the waters. So most important also, the payback period we calculated to be a maximum of 5 years, and that's why the subsidies were high, because also the displacement setting comes with its own challenge of the risk of closure of the camp when the peace returns for the country where the refugees come from. So those are the project details outlined there. Over time, we have seen actually there is need and there is potential in displacement settings for electricity. Here you will see the consumption comparison for the 2 mini grids. One is 3 times larger than the other one, but the consumption is not 3 times as the size is. We see more consumption actually in the settlement mini grid, but this said here is the percentage comparison of the demand growth over time. Also, this one is very interesting because it looks like the demand growth month to month is almost following the same pattern. Maybe the economic conditions in the refugee settlement and the host community are almost the same. But of course, the demand growth over the last few months, it's been quite higher in the settlement where the refugees live. And here is an interesting one also on the commercial customers. Here we talk about the SMEs and the social institutions in the refugee camp, as well as the refugee settlement, as well as the host community. We see actually the businesses in the settlement consume more power than those in the host community. Of course, maybe because of higher population in the settlement and higher demand for services. And here we see actually households in the refugee settlement consuming more on average per month than the households in the host community town. Then this begs the question whether there are equal opportunities between the host communities and the refugee settlements. That question, I don't have an answer. Maybe someone might answer that because it looks like the refugees have higher purchasing power than the host communities. As explained, it is a business case, a business model where the private sector provides services of electricity. The customers are metered through prepaid metering system, and they purchase tokens of electricity through mobile money. And the private sector owns and operates the generation as well as the distribution assets. Of course, DFID provided the grant, and the private sector is also working very hard now to secure additional subsidies in order to expand the mini grid, especially in the refugee settlement, to be able to supply more households as the demand is there, and the desire is also there, the willingness to pay. So this is a representation of the 3 levels of the business model, which is being employed in these 2 mini grids actually. So these are just photos to show that we have been able to do a clean energy transition in Kalobeyei settlement, so such that what is on the left is not replicated in the settlement, but what is on the right is implemented and upscaled. The power distribution board now looks more safer in Kalobeyei settlement. That is the one on the right, and looks like it can provide more reliable electricity. And the power distribution on the right is the one in Kalobeyei settlement. It's sort of spaghetti, but with the spaghetti, you can at least separate them. You can know where power is coming from and where it is going through the drop lines, which you can see there, unlike on the left. And it looks also more secure to the users. So we have, of course, several lessons we have learned from the implementation of these 2 mini grids and on our ongoing work under the ESDS project. First of all, it is important while we are working with the private sector or whatever organization is implementing mini grids in these settlements to plan for unexpected demand growth or demand lockdown, I would say, because first of all, people, when they get this electricity, they are very creative and start so many business. They acquire a lot of appliances. In fact, what we have experienced is some businesses have relocated from Kakuma refugee camp to the settlement because of the reliability of electricity. So this one you need to plan for, because the mini grid in the settlement is already overstrained because of the demand which is there and growing every day, including hunger clients. So it's also important to have consideration of the host communities to minimize conflicts. Conflicts will always be there, as we have experienced even during the implementation of the projects, because the host community will feel sidelined or unequally treated in terms of opportunities. But to manage that, you need to assure them that there is equitable distribution of resources and services. So the regulatory framework is another important thing which needs to be flexible and responsive because of, for example, of tariff adjustment. As the mini grid operator, private sector who is there, and we have been exchanging with them, they have reached a point where they need to increase the tariff because they are incurring a lot of costs, especially running the diesel generators to meet the demand which is there. But the regulatory framework is not easily accommodating to do such tariff adjustments very quickly. The private sector payback risk guarantee in cases of camp closure, we have experienced this. I mean, 2 or 3 months ago, the government of Kenya announced closure of all refugee camps in the country. And then now private sector will run into panic because they don't know where to take their assets. I mean, they have not recovered their investments, and such risks exist and continue to be there. So, sustainable subsidies are also required. We have this case where now we need to increase the system size, but a private company has not secured the subsidies. So increasing the system size will mean increasing tariffs, and this will not be well received by the communities who are being served. Intensive community engagement, of course, that we cannot insist enough. It's very important for both the host and refugee communities, such that they have buy-in at the very beginning, such that they expect a service which they will pay for, and not as a free service or like a cash transfer service. Promotion of productive use of electricity is very important to sustain such mini grids. There's need for these anchor clients, the businesses, the social institutions. And this we find very important, especially in the settlement mini grid, which is now connecting telecommunication towers, a bank, and community social halls. So it is sustaining, and the cash flows are quite interesting when you have these younger clients. So colleagues, that's it from our side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jackson, for your instructive and comprehensive presentation. Thank you very much. I can see that there are lots of questions in the chat already that's popping in. And to help this, I suggest that I share with you my Miro boards so that we can have a summary of Jackson's presentation. If anyone wants, in the meantime, to ask a question directly to Jackson, please. I think I will take them one by one. Okay. Jackson, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah, okay. So I will, so people, if you have access to Miro board, so if you want to just use the post-it here, you double click on the post-it to your copy paste it, and then you can input your question here. And I will go through some question from the chat to ask you. There was one question that was asked, how many people were provided? So here we can see the summary. There were 347 for the displaced population and 97 for the so here you can, for the host community. So here you can find, I will make it bigger, okay. So
Jonathan, yeah, if I can just add, yes, those are the number of household clients connected already to the mini grids. So in addition, we have businesses and social institutions connected. For example, in the settlement mini grid, we have around 131 businesses and 11 institutions, while in the host community mini grid, we have around 27 businesses and 6 institutions.
Okay. Thank you very much. This project shows also the link that we can, that's also what I like in this project. It shows that there is no clear cut between household and when you provide in the provision of electricity. There is linkage with the community facilities, with the businesses, and also the operations sometimes. Another question I have is, how did the project handle the existing energy entrepreneurs because the project was a threat to their businesses? Do you understand?
Yes, I understand the question. Okay. Can I answer?
Sure.
Yes. So as I said, this Kalobey settlement was being established or was new by the time we entered. It was only 3 years old when we started the project, and there were not many local entrepreneurs with the diesel generators, as it is the case with Kakuma refugee camp. So they were minimal. Of course, they were there, and what we offered is a better service, what the private sector offered and what we advised them, because we also factored in these diesel generators as well as solar home systems. But what I can confirm is they still exist, especially in the unelectrified sections. The solar home systems also coexist with the mini grid electricity for especially those very poor people who cannot afford to pay for this electricity.
Thank you. That's very clear. And this is a bring to another question by Thomas, and was how did you made the selection criteria to select which part of the camp or which household to connect?
Yes, good question. That was a very difficult one. So what we did actually, we did it technically also to manage the community expectations. So we targeted the institutions because the settlement is well planned and there is a geographical area set aside for institutions and market centers.
Okay.
And then there is a street set aside for businesses. So those were our two target areas. Then the households which were near these two facility areas were now connected and were given priority. But now we are advising the private sector and the government and UNHCR on expansion now to connect the other households.
Thank you very much. So it was really a physical, I mean, for the moment, it was in terms of physical development, so the nearest to the community facilities or to the production sites, basically.
Yes. Mm.
Thank you. There is another question. What are the productive use of electricity you are observing both in camps and host communities from Borja?
Well, if we talk of the productive uses, I will talk about the ones which the community population engage in, because of course we have the bigger businesses like the banks, the telecommunication masts, and the field offices of the humanitarian organizations and NGOs, which are powered. But apart from this, now when you go at the community level, what you'll find are majorly shops, and here they consume power for cooling services, that is the fridges, and entertainment joints is another productive use which we are seeing. Then a lot of welding because of majorly the transport in these areas is of motorcycles, the two-wheelers. So we find a lot of welding. And the other one we could talk about is these barber shops and saloons. Where people get to do their hair.
Okay, thank you. And another question which is related to the economics regarding the private sector engagement and the break even. Can you explain a little bit how they would operate in the long term with the targeted community?
Yeah, basically when we were doing the tendering for the private sector, we required that they submit a financial proposal for the projects. And it is also required by the regulator, the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority. They have to submit their business case and business model. So usually within this model, they have to factor in all the financials, including their investment, that is equity and debt, as well as subsidies. So what the regulator does, he gives the private company a 20-year license to operate this mini grid in this space with exclusivity. And within those 20 years is mandated to provide reliable electricity where the regulator monitors the service and the quality of service, and also financials. So in case there is need for increase of tariff, the private sector is allowed to make another application to the regulator, submitting a new business model based on increased system size or a reduced system size. So I would say it is a regulated business, and that is what we required, that the private sector obtain a permit, so that it is now in the hands of the government for sustainability, because our projects for development partners like us, GIZ, are only time limited.
Okay. Very clear. And this brings me to, so if I understand correctly, there is, so the private sector owns and operates the power generation, and then the government owns and the distribution line, basically, the physical lines. That's right?
Yeah, partly you are right, I would say. initially that was not the case. The case was that the private sector owns and operates the power generation and distribution assets.
Okay.
Fully owned by the private sector. But under the new arrangement with the financing from BMZ, we will finance the construction of the distribution line. And because it is public funds or government money, we shall hand over the assets to the government of Kenya and majorly the regional government. So the regional government now going forward will sign a memorandum of understanding with the private company so that the private company can use the distribution assets owned by the government to distribute power.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much, Jackson. And who's responsible for in the future or now for collecting the revenue from the sales of electricity?
It is the private sector,
The private
and
sector, okay.
yeah, regulated by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority.
Thank you very much. And I think, let me check my watch. Yeah, no, we have some few minutes. There are so many questions. What is the ownership model of the mini grid? So I think you just answered it. It's owned by the private sector. And operating and maintenance, it's also the private sector. So it's regulated by the local government. And another question, sorry, I tried to, were there also other financing mechanisms that you have considered when starting the projects beside the RBF? Were there any other options, or it was something that came very quickly?
I mean, for the project we were implementing at that time, it was RBF. So we implemented, as I said, the pilot phase of the 60 kilowatt and RBF. But our technical advisory now to the private sector through the ESDS projects is that they are open to other financing mechanisms, whether through debt or equity or direct investment. They are exploring all other alternatives or other options in order to upscale the mini grid. So they are open to other financing mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there is. Can you briefly, because because this can go very long, but there is a question related to the breakdown of the cost of the system between the PV, the distribution, the battery, or are you able to provide such level of detail, or roughly to show a certain proportion, or this go too much into the details?
Well, so I can quickly clarify my question. It's just because I'm trying to compare it to the equivalent global prices. So it's more looking, so I have a very good understanding of how much the batteries and photovoltaics would cost in Europe or North America. We're just trying to see what the premium is in these situations. Just wondering, like, how much extra are the private sector companies charging to build such a plant? Thank you.
Well, I could try, because what I gave there as the cost of the system is the average, including the generation system, that is the PV, the batteries, and the diesel generator. It also includes the power distribution network, the costs. So, let me see.
We can also take it offline. It's okay. It doesn't have to be right now.
Yeah, I think maybe because this is very detailed, and then we come very down the detail. I have a last question to you, and also I think it's interesting, and this will be the last. And otherwise, all the questions we will try to answer to each one after the workshop. And there is one question related to the difficulty that you faced with the developers in securing the license necessary for the mini-grid regulation. So maybe the time, the length of time, or the process, if it's pretty streamlined process, or due to the location, this is something that you had to support the developer with.
I would say it is a process we had to support the developer with, and at the time we were obtaining the permits, and even now we do not have like a straightforward licensing procedure because the regulations are not in place, the mini-grid regulations for the country and especially for the private sector mini-grids. But through another GIZ project, promotion of solar hybrid mini-grids, we supported the regulator to come up with the regulations, and they are now under review. Maybe in the next few months, they will be gazetted. So I would say the challenges we faced is one that it was not straightforward because also there are a lot of requirements when you are doing the permitting or when you are obtaining the license. You have to have the community agreement, you have to have the local county government approval, you have to have the national government approval, you have to have the engineering drawings and engineering report certified by a registered engineer, you have to have the national government approval for the project. And all this requires a lot of money, and that is why you saw there in the cost breakdown that I have written soft costs, which we were able to meet as GIZ. We assisted them to engage the community to steer the process of agreement with the community in terms of signing the community agreement. Then again, it is a requirement that you must submit land ownership documents where you shall install this mini-grid. And the land here was not a small issue actually, because it increased actually the cost of the project. We wanted to establish the mini-grid inside the camp so that we do only low voltage distribution to the households. But now when we talked to the local regional government, they allocated us land, which was 3 kilometers away. So that meant we had to do step-up transformer, medium voltage line, and step-down transformers. This cost was not foreseen, and we had to talk to the financial of the project, DFID, in order to meet this additional cost. So also the licensing procedure, or the people are not transparent. Sometimes there were issues along the licensing process of corruption, but this we were able to deal with because they were reported to GIZ, and GIZ now stepped in with the assistance of the national government, and we were able now to streamline it. So at the end of the day, it got a lot of delay. I think it took like 9 months to get a permit, whereas it is supposed to take a maximum of 3 months according to the Energy Act of the country. Thank you. Jonathan, you are muted.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for your very deep understanding and expertise in that subject, and that covers all aspects of the solution. Thank you very much. I did learn a lot from this presentation. I will go back to your slides as well. Thank you. I think we are just on time, a few minutes late. Jackson, thank you so much. Do you want to add something, or? Okay. So, Jackson, I think you're muted.
Sorry, yeah, I'm saying we shall try and answer all the questions which were not answered. Yeah. So Jonathan, once you share with us, we can provide written answers and send to you, then you can circulate. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you for this amazing presentation. And to everyone, there is 5-minute breaks, and then We come back for Laura from Practical Action to present project implemented for solar home system in Rwanda. Thank you very much to everyone. Welcome back, everyone. The next presentation, thank you, Laura, will be Laura from Practical Action with an amazing project on the solar home system in Rwanda. Thank you, Laura.
So I'm hoping you can see my screen now.
Yes, yeah.
Super.
Perfect, perfect.
Great, I'll get started straight away then. So today I'm going to talk to you about Practical Action's Renewable Energy for Refugees project and looking at our work that's been really looking at household electricity services in 3 camps in Rwanda. So just to give you a quick introduction to RE4R, the project. The project is being delivered in a partnership between Practical Action and UNHCR and is being funded by the IKEA Foundation. It started in April 2017 and will run through to February 2022. And the project is being implemented both in Jordan and in Rwanda, and it's great to see so many people on the call today that have been involved in various parts of this project. We're working with lots of partners and collaborating with lots of people on this project. But for the presentation today, I'm really going to focus on the part of the project that's being implemented in 3 camps in Rwanda, which is Gihembe, Kigeme, and Nyabiheke camps in Rwanda. And just to give you a sort of quick insight to the demographics of those camps, you can see at the bottom of this slide when those camps were formed and a sort of estimate of their population. So you can see sort of about 3,500 households in each of those 3 camps. And the project in Rwanda, so for both of the country scopes, both in Rwanda and Jordan, we've really looked to try to implement interventions that look at energy access solutions across the suite of energy needs. So looking at homes, livelihoods and enterprises, and also community level energy access as well, a sort of total energy access approach. And this intervention and this piece of work that I'm going to talk about today is looking at solar home systems for households and really small enterprises. So this kind of spans the homes and the households and the livelihoods component of the project. But as you can see, we had a number of other interventions that are tackling some of those other areas of energy needs. And the idea of this piece of work is that it really sits within a suite of wider energy access solutions. And really throughout each of those energy access interventions, what we've really been trying to focus on and bringing sort of Practical Action's experience of is a market-based approach, market systems development approaches to really try and build those, strengthen those energy markets in the camps and really trying to deliver sort of sustainable solutions that have refugees involved throughout the system. And so to take you through the process that we went through in terms of designing and implementing the interventions that we've implemented in Rwanda, we really got a sort of multi-stage process. We did a very comprehensive assessment at the start of the project, really to try and understand energy needs and priorities, again, across those different areas of energy usage, household, enterprise, and community energy uses, identifying potential technology system solutions, but also then doing the wider systems analysis, really looking at the context, the governmental context, the regulatory context, and also the market, the existing market, the suppliers that were operating in and around the camps, what people were choosing to spend their money on, what energy access solutions people were working with, people were using, before the project. We then went through a co-design process where we worked with local and national stakeholders, which included camp staff, government staff, our colleagues at UNHCR at multiple levels, other partners working in the camps, and of course the refugee representatives themselves. And during that co-design process, we built towards a consensus on the most suitable energy interventions to implement, which was that sort of suite of interventions that we looked at, of which the solar home systems was one which we thought would best meet the household and some of the enterprise uses within the camps. We then went through an engagement process, and I'll touch on that in a bit more detail later on. And really what we were talking about here is engaging with private sector suppliers, really to try and get them to enter the markets in the camp and to be able to offer their products and services directly to refugees in those 3 camps. So we went through a private sector engagement process, then transitioned into an implementation phase where we partnered with a number of selected solar home system suppliers, drew up agreements to provide technical and financial and facilitation support, and then supported those suppliers to provide their, as I say, energy products and services directly to refugees. And overall, our sort of intention for this intervention is to increase uptake, so to actually get people access to the solar home systems that they can use in their households. But then beyond the uptake, really making sure that people are able to use those solar home systems in the way that best suits their needs in their households. And then really to track what transformations using those solar home systems has on people's quality of life. And I'll touch on some of the results we've seen so far for the project. And then we sort of got our monitoring progress, evaluating the impact of that intervention in particular, and sharing some of our learnings and recommendations, which today is a great opportunity to do some of that. And to map that process to the dimensions that we're trying to look at in this workshop today, and the sort of structure that Jonathan and the GPA team have been working for this series of presentations, you can see, although the process we went through doesn't map sort of directly, there's not sort of one step for each. You can see that sort of across the process that we went through, we looked at both a demand assessment, supply assessment, consideration of technical solutions, partner engagement through almost all of the phases of the project, and then a financing support, development of business models and lessons learned. So I've just tried to signpost the structure for this workshop onto the process that we followed through for RE4R. So that's a sort of quick mapping across of what we actually did. Looking at the energy situation for households before the project started, we did a very sort of comprehensive quantitative and qualitative and also market research dimension to the assessment phase. And what we really looked at in terms of household energy use was really trying to understand what people were using before the project was implemented. And what you can see on these graphs is that really solar home system usage was quite low. Vast majority of people were using candles or mobile phones, or in some cases torches or smaller solar lanterns. And that what was sort of particularly important for our private sector engagement was really looking at what kind of spending households were already sort of seeing on a monthly basis for their own household energy use. And as you can see here, that we had sort of split and a range of how much people were spending, particularly on sort of candles and mobile phone charging and batteries. And this was really key for sort of doing our private sector engagement. So what we were trying to do is look at what segments we could see in the market based on people's existing expenditure on non-renewable lighting sources, and then try to engage private sector companies to be able to offer alternative, renewable, better quality, ideally tier 1 solar home systems to be able to replace the spending that was being expended on non-renewable lighting sources. And what we saw in particular was there was a high priority for energy access for households. People that we surveyed very much rated their household energy needs as the most important ones that they wanted to see addressed. They really saw that working, studying, and doing sort of chores around the household were important reasons why electrical lighting in the household would have been important. And also use of appliances, phone charging, televisions, and radios were also things that people prioritized in terms of what they would have wanted were energy to be available. So building on the assessment phase, and then we went through the sort of co-design process where we formulated a suite of interventions, of which one of them would be to increase camp-wide access to whole solar home systems. We also established some secondary aims for that intervention, which was really to decrease spend on non-renewables, to ensure improved quality of energy access in households, so really to get towards tier 1, and also to provide training and capacity building alongside that. Then to go through the engagement process, we went through a competitive process to select a number of suppliers to deliver solar home systems in those 3 camps. We went through a sort of multi-stage process really to filter down and select. We really wanted to select multiple suppliers to make sure that refugees had choice and a range of products and services to pick from in the camps. And we also wanted to have a range of price points to reflect the spread of spending that people were experiencing on non-renewable sources in their households. So we went through a process, selected 2 suppliers and really tried to match them and match their targets and match the sort of key milestones in their partnerships with us to what size of the house, what size of the camp, what market segment we thought they would be able to address. We shared the data that we collected during the assessment phase with them so that they had an understanding of the market in the camps. And we also sort of shared our goals, tried to understand their goals and what they would need to be able to access the markets in the camps. And then we put together a package of financial, technical and facilitation support to overcome the specific barriers identified by each of those suppliers. And so towards the end of 2018 into the start of 2019, we formalized those partnerships and went through a process of contracting and then got the suppliers on board. And really their operations in the camp started from July 2019 onwards. So they've been operating under RE4R in the camps for getting up towards 2 years. Really to try and support the market-based approaches that we used, we really tried to, during the engagement phase, really tried to share information to be able to allow the suppliers to design effective business models based on the market size, so what we had found out from the assessment phase, but also really trying to understand what would make their business models viable in the long term so that they would be able to sustain their operations and sustain offering their products and services to households in the camps on a long term and in the long term. And that was really a case of sharing some of the information that we had collected during the assessment phase, but also through our MEL processes and being adaptive as the project had been implemented. So key in that was sort of ability to pay and existing income and expenditure, customer sizes, market sizes, and also balancing business costs and business model costs with the customer base that was existing in the camps. And then the way that we sort of supported the suppliers to do that, as I say, was through a package of technical, financial and facilitation support, really building that relationship with the suppliers, very much trying to work on an adaptive management relationship with those suppliers, and then making sure that we were feeding back and doing joint MEL activities together to be able to adapt our business models and adapt our approach and make adjustments as we went along. And certainly I'm sure anyone sort of experiencing implementation over the last year certainly had to be adaptive in the face of COVID and COVID restrictions. And that's been a key sort of part of the relationship, is being able to adapt through those external changes and through those market changes. So just to give a snapshot of the two business models and the 2 suppliers that we selected. We selected 2 suppliers, Bbox, who already had some presence in the camps, although at quite a small level. There were some existing solar home systems customers in the camps, and they offered a 50-watt system with 3 bulbs and a phone charger with the option of additional appliances. And they were really targeted. Their system was more expensive, so we thought that would be best suited to the segment of the market that had the comparatively higher household incomes, and also those enterprises that would need the additional sizing of the system to be able to power those other appliances. And then we also selected Bellicom, who initially offered a 12-watt and a 20-watt system with 3 lights, a phone charger and a radio. And they were really focused at the household market, really looking towards the sort of middle part, the middle market segment, and Critically, Bellicom also offered a revolving fund, which was a community level loans and saving schemes, really to try and be able to offer their products and services to those lower income households to be able to, the idea was that people would be able to take out small loans, do small scale economic trading, economic activity at a household level, to be able to boost their income and then to be able to make sure that they could pay their ongoing monthly payments in the long term. So you can see a sort of a breakdown of what the supplier business models included: sales, installation, user training, awareness raising, marketing, but also a real focus on those after sale services such as technical repair, customer support and warranties. Both the suppliers also engaged refugees as employees and staff. And then we also partnered with them to offer sales data, progress reporting and monitoring reporting, and understanding sort of what was working and what wasn't working in terms of how viable that business model was in the long term. And then in terms of the sort of price point of those two systems, Bbox offered their solar home systems at 2,900 Rwandan francs a month for a period of 3 years, which was a subsidized rate. So in particular there, the sort of financial assistance we provided was to provide a subsidized rate for that solar home system. For Bellicom, they offered their solar home systems at 2,600 Rwandan francs per month over a 3-year period. And that was not a subsidized cost. That was a standard cost for their solar home systems. And they particularly wanted to focus on this revolving fund mechanism to support the lower income households. And to give some examples of the kind of financial support we provided. So as Bellicom sort of identified this, accessing the bigger segment of the market really required some financial support for those customers. They had this concept of a revolving fund. So under our agreement with RE4R, we provided some seed capital for that revolving fund, which allowed Bellicom to set up these community schemes to allow people to be able to pay for their solar home systems in a more secure way over the duration of the payment period. And actually, we also provided some technical support as well in terms of matching them with partners in the camps who could support the implementation of those kind of savings groups and community groups for financial support services. Additionally, because Bellicom didn't have a presence previously in the camp and didn't have the same kind of distribution network that Bbox had, Bellicom also requested some financial support to construct a retail outlet in each shop. And that really allowed them to establish a selling point, provide a base for their Bellicom staff to support their customers, which included refugee sales agents and technicians, and allow them to offer ongoing customer support. On the other side, looking at Bbox really requested a subsidy to reduce the monthly costs of their customers for that sort of 3-year period. They really saw that the price of their system normally sort of offered sort of throughout Rwanda was 4,800 Rwandan francs. And really when they looked at the existing spending data and sort of ability to pay data, that was seen as the most significant barrier for them to be able to reach a sizable market in the camp. So they really focused on a subsidy to over that 3-year period. And then that would customize refugees to paying this energy service fee that would be continued to pay on an ongoing basis and allow refugees to access that product, the solar home system product, for the long term. So those are just some examples of the kind of financial support that we provided to those 2 different solar home system suppliers. Looking at the project's progress to date. So far we've seen around just over 3,500 solar home systems sold and installed, and that represents around 50% of the camp now having access to tier 1 energy through those solar home systems. We've got 424 participants involved in the revolving fund, those community loans and saving groups. And so far we're seeing around 87% of customers managing to continue to be on time with those monthly payments. And you can just see there some of the scores that we've got from our outcome monitoring and from our feedback from refugees directly about their usage of the solar home system. So they're satisfied with the quality, generally feeling that the solar home system meets their basic needs, and for the vast majority using their solar home systems as their primary source of lighting. And just on the bottom of this slide here, you can see how the sales profile progressed since the sales started in July 2019 to where they are. Actually, this graph just goes up to the end of December, but that gives you an indication of the sales profile of each of those suppliers. And in terms of the outcomes and in terms of improvements to quality of life, again, from our refugee feedback, we can also see that there's good perceptions of safety, and people report feeling safer in their home as a result of owning the solar home system. Good 84% able to do recreational leisure activities after dark, people able to study in their households after dark. And we've seen that's been particularly important during lockdown, where lessons were switched to radios, and schools, refugee children were not allowed to, that had to participate remotely in schooling. And critically here also, 88% of solar home system customers report that they're able to do productive activities or business activities or those sort of economic activities after dark. And that's been one of the key findings and one of the key sort of recommendations that we've had from this project, is really to try and couple that economic side of things and that livelihoods and that household income with the energy access. And here's just a couple of pictures to give you an illustration of the implementation itself. So you can see here there's a solar panel, that's a Bbox solar panel installed on the roof of this household in the camps. This is somebody who has a solar home system installed in their shop, and you can see it's providing lighting and allows people to continue trading after dark with the lighting that's available in the shop. And here you can just see a number of refugee households. You can see there's some solar panels on each of those roofs to sort of indicate the level of uptake and the level of usage of people, how people use their solar home systems in the camp itself. So our key, I sort of distilled this down to 3 lessons learned and recommendations. And the first one is sort of the point that I was just touching on from some of the outcome monitoring. Really improving that energy access and household incomes builds that economic resilience. So giving people access to energy allows people to boost those household incomes, and vice versa. Having that household income and that support and that resilient in household income also allows people to access energy and continue paying for the products and services that really they use and best meet their needs. And particularly with the other interventions that we've seen in Rwanda, we see a lot of synergy between providing energy access for households, enterprises, and communities. Doing those implementations all alongside each other really support each other and build that overall economic activity in the camp. So, for example, one of our other interventions was installing streetlights. Installing streetlights allows people to have trade under the streetlights, move to their work, move back at home at night, and so all of that supports. All of that supports refugee participation, employment, and economic activity across the whole sort of market system. Market conditions for businesses within camps are challenging, and sort of building that commitment from those suppliers has been really key. Our sort of formal partnership with Bbox ended over a year ago, and we still see them continue to support their customers in the camps, selling additional appliances, continuing to operate in the camp. Our partnership with Belecom is still ongoing, but we certainly see in terms of them employing refugees, building shops, taking on new customers, continuing to support their customers, really building that commitment is key. And I think one of the things, maybe one of the reflections which we have was sort of really trying to understand the supplier risks and willingness to work in those fragile markets. What conditions make those businesses in the viable term? Going through that process with the suppliers has really helped us to be able to support those suppliers through some very turbulent times, through COVID lockdowns, through lots of sort of external factors. So going through that process with those suppliers, trying to assess those risks. There's definitely things which we didn't understand as well as we might have done at the start of the project, but certainly kind of committing to that learning process with those suppliers has been really key. And then the last reflection really is that affordability of energy products and services will always be an issue for some households. We certainly had to be realistic about the use of subsidies, particularly for Bbox. And we're now in the process where, based on our feedback from refugees, we understand that there is a segment of the refugee community that has not been reached by either of these suppliers, and we're adopting alternative strategies for inclusion and really adapting the level of subsidy that we're probably going to have to provide and the level of support that we're going to have to provide to make sure that those solar home systems and that energy access is available to all of those people who want to access it. There's certain households who are going to need additional support, and we're in the process of sort of implementing and developing that strategy now. So those are the sort of 3 key reflections from the project so far. And that's it in terms of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this inspiring presentation and description in detail of the outcome of the project. As you can see, there is quite a lot of questions coming in. I would have, Laura, quickly, and just for the audience, I will delay the end of the workshop by a few minutes, but the session are recorded, so feel free to do whatever, jump into another meeting, and you can come back to, and I will answer to the different question that has been raised. So my question to you, Laura, was for the revolving fund, briefly, but how does it work, or how people can apply to it, or is it? Thank you.
Yeah, so with Bellicom, we developed a number of eligibility criteria, and it's very much also about the groups themselves deciding who they want to partner with and who they want to build that group with. So the idea is that it's only available to Bellicom customers. You have to be a Bellicom solar home system owner. And then there are a number of sort of facilitators who are Bellicom staff and refugee staff who help informing those groups. There's a training package that people need to go on, which is about sort of basic operation of the camp, but also some basic kind of household budgeting skills and understanding what the loan means and what the payment means. And then it's really a group loan scheme whereby the groups get together, they can take out these very small scale loans to do small scale trading in their households. And the idea is that it just allows refugees to have a bit of security, to be able to do some small scale trading, to operate small scale businesses, or even just any other sort of economic activity. There's also eligibility criteria, and the group have to mutually decide what kind of businesses and what kind of economic activity they want to participate in the group together. They take out small loans, they repay the loans, and then take a cut of the sharings, a cut of the savings once the loans have been successfully paid. But the idea is that it allows those economic activities, supports those household economic activities, to allow refugees to have a little bit more income on a weekly or day-to-day or monthly basis, to be able to allow them to keep up those monthly solar home system costs. And also alongside that, Bellicom have also looked at adopting flexible payments periods, so not just monthly, weekly repayments, in some cases even shorter, more flexible periods, and Bbox have done a similar program, actually, certainly adapting to reflect the very kind of lumpy household budgets that are often experienced in those settings. So to allow those flexible repayments and allow that kind of flexibility, and just really to support customers to be able to continue to pay for their solar home systems. Jonathan, you're on mute.
So this is all held and managed by Bbox or Bellicom?
The revolving fund is run by Bellicom.
Okay.
It's a particular strategy that they adopted to really help. They really wanted to address, when we looked at the market segments at the start, they were like, yeah, we think our price point is good for this midsection, but we also want to offer our products to these lower income households, these households that have very small amounts of spending on non-renewable, candles, and they had this revolving fund as a particular strategy to really try and reach more customers in the camp.
Thank you. There is question, or did the assessment look at the energy needs of surrounding hosting communities?
Not in as much detail. We certainly talked to the sort of local authorities, and where the camps are located, they're all part of the Rwanda electrification rollout program. So slightly different context and slightly different market for the host community. However, we did partner with Bbox, who have a very well-established solar home system business throughout Rwanda, who had a very good understanding of the host community. Bellicom, less so. They were less focused on solar home systems, but they certainly had a background and a track record in providing energy solutions, other types of energy solutions in the Rwandan context. So as well as the kind of insights that we had, we knew that the private sector suppliers that we had selected for partnering had a good experience of the host community as well.
Thank you, very clear. There is another question regarding the technical capacity of the implementing agency.
As in the suppliers themselves, or?
Maybe Miriam, if you can, hello. Yeah, there is no mention implementing agencies. So.
I mean, maybe if I reflect, we certainly, and the suppliers themselves and ourselves identified the sort of energy awareness levels in the camp as certainly a barrier. We didn't know that there was, or we certainly saw from our assessment that there was not necessarily extensive understanding or extensive awareness of what kind of products and services were out there, renewable energy services. So we certainly did with both the suppliers and actually with some community mobilizers group. We focused on building general renewable energy awareness. Obviously, each of the suppliers was quite interested in marketing and showing the advantages of their own product. But we also had a community mobilizer partner who generally did sort of renewable energy awareness sessions, really just to try and let people know what was out there, let people know what some of the benefits of renewable energy technologies would be, how they could use them in their household. So we did try and do those much more wider renewable energy awareness programs as well alongside that. And some of that included people like camp managers and other implementing partners in the camps as well.
Thank you. That's very clear. There is also a question, and also there was the same question to the other, which I did not ask. It was related to the security of the assets of the equipment itself.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think a much bigger problem than security and vandalism is rats. Rats eating cables is a very persistent problem in the camps. But to touch on the vandalism piece, we partner with the Refugee Executive Committee and also with the camp managers themselves. They are responsible for security in the camps. They have a good understanding of the sort of challenges in the camps, and really if any of the customers have a problem with vandalism or security of the assets, their first port of call is to the Refugee Executive Committee and then also to the camp managers who will support them to resolve any issues regarding security. What I would say, particularly with the solar home systems, is because we installed camp-wide solar street lighting alongside that, that very much helps the Refugee Executive Committee and the people responsible for security to move around after dark, to see what's happening and to be able to provide that level of security. So we really see that sort of community plus household energy access, bringing those things together really supports, those interventions are sort of mutually supporting and really help. I mean, I can't say that it isn't a problem. There have been some thefts and there has been some cases of vandalism, but certainly the refugee committee themselves and the camp managers themselves have mechanisms in place for dealing with that. But yeah, rat damage is a much bigger problem. If anyone has a solution to rat damage, then yeah, you'll find yourself a big market, I think.
Thank you very much. It shows really how broad, I mean, all the different aspects you need to consider and to address in order to deliver this type of service. And I have another question related to, and this interests me because it's concern recycling. So if there is any plan for maintenance and then recycling.
Yeah, so this was part of our selection process with both of those suppliers. We asked them to put in a sort of waste management and an end of life management plan. So they both have processes in place for doing that. We haven't quite got to the point of any of those solar home systems getting to the point where they're no longer functioning or they've come to their end of life. So we certainly have those plans and we have those commitments from the suppliers in place. I guess the project is probably going to finish before we see those come to fruition. But we certainly had that as part of our assessment process and our selection process, that kind of commitment to dealing with waste accordingly. The BeBox model is slightly different in that refugees pay a sort of ongoing subscription and energy service fee. So if any of the components, you're basically paying for a guaranteed energy service. So if any of the components, it's like an extended warranty almost. So they very much have a commitment. As long as you remain a customer, they'll maintain your system and they'll keep your system in place. So, and that can be sort of an indefinite period. Really, people can continue to pay that on a monthly rolling basis after the initial 3 years. So they have a slightly different scheme for managing.
Thank you. Very interesting. The kind of renting the service, it helps recycling and keeping a certain maintenance for the product. Thank you. I will go with, does anyone in the audience wanted to raise a question directly to Laura? Please. Because there is a lot here still in the chat, but if anyone wants to ask a question loud, okay. Don't hesitate to jump in. I will continue with the question. There was a very interesting question. Yeah, what are the barriers identified by the suppliers?
Yeah, so critically with BeBox, they saw their sort of higher price point as the key barrier for accessing the camp. Also, the sort of renewable energy awareness, that kind of sort of incentivizing and promoting that. Do people know what solar home systems do, how they can work, what benefits they can bring to their household? So that was another key component of the barrier, sort of that general energy awareness and product awareness in particular of solar home systems. Another key barrier was sort of that ongoing customer support. So BeBox had a very well-established kind of network in Rwanda. They had hotline and they had sort of shops very well distributed around the camp. Belecom didn't, so they saw that setting up of their retail outlet in the shops as a real way to be able to interface with their customers, interact with their customers, provide support, not just sales support, but that ongoing customer support, ongoing issues. So having that footprint in the camp was really important for them. It's basically making sure that they had the network in place to be able to support their customers. BeBox and Belecom were slightly different at a different place in the market. So they each had different challenges with that, which they chose to address differently. Those are, yeah, just a couple. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Laura. And I think due to the time, sorry, we'll have to cut, but for everyone who typed or sent a question, we will answer after the workshop. We have the contacts, so we will answer directly. And then for the feedback, wrap up and follow up of this session. Laura, thank you very much. It has been very instructive for me and I guess for all the audience, and it shows really the complexity and how broad all the different aspects that ones need to cover when you deliver electricity in the displacement settings. So thank you very much, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will stop sharing my screen and sorry. Okay, so I will thank you very much, everybody, for your question, for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the project presentation as much as I did. Next session will be Wednesday this week, and there will be two presentation and two projects. One is from SNV, Solar Lamp, a market-based approach, and the same for the second one, Mercy Corp, a solar home system combined with electric cooker. Both projects will focus on the market-based and approach they have taken to deliver the provision of electricity. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and I look forward to see you in the next session. Thank you.